When you hear the idea of accountability, what does it conjure up in your mind? What does it mean? Why should we bother with it in our businesses? More specifically, what about being financially accountable for your actions? In this broadcast, I'm going to have a look at the what accountability is, why we should bother as business owners with financial accountability, and how do we actually go about it. And until that fateful moment, folks, let's just kick off with a bit of blood warming music. Hmm. There, folks, we are back in the room. We had a little bit of an IT gremlin that crept in there, and what we had moments of silence with a moment of banner, but we're now back in here. So, financial accountability, I suppose, a little introduction first of all. My name is Mahmood, and for about 40 plus years of my working and business life, I've been involved in education. I'm currently an accountant. I run my own businesses called I Hate Numbers and Numbers Know How. I'm an author, take a bow there, of a book called I Hate Numbers. And in over 27 plus years of helping thousands of businesses, including my own, what I found is that accountability is one of those really crucial things that business owners, whether you're running a business with multiple team members, whether you're running what's called a solopreneur type business on your own, accountability is really quite a critical thing that we need to do. And more importantly, financial accountability has to take center stage. One of the primary reasons we go into business is to have an impact, deliver our why, uh, effectively sort of make a difference to people's lives, solve people's problems, and all the rest of it. And in order for us to do that consistently, in order for us to actually sustain, in order to also reward ourselves and our team, to reinvest for the future, to continue to pay suppliers, to continue to all those wonderful things, money or making profit has to filter into the system and it has to be a primary outcome. Now, how you go about making that money is a secondary conversations. Your ethical stance, your integrity, whatever you want to call it here, it certainly stands for you and how you approach your business. But fundamentally, making money as opposed to pursuing a hobby is absolutely critical. Nobody goes into business thinking I'm going to go into this venture because I deliberately want to crash and burn. I don't want to be successful. So therefore, what we've got to do is to actually think about the ways we can achieve that success, and accountability is a critical part of that process. Now, for me, when I hear that word accountability, it has this idea of taking responsibility for your own actions, your own behaviors. It's your team members who are helping you deliver your why, who are going to be accountable for their actions, having responsibility for it. And critically, there are two or three elements that we really got to take on board to actually make that a reality. Now, believe it or not, part of the battle that we have in our businesses is what goes on not only between our own ears, but that is of our team members as well. Effectively taking responsibility for something, being accountable for that action here. There's a number of practical things we can do, but actually how we approach that, the culture we create, how we actually sort of respond to our team members as they're delivering that why, how we look at ourselves when we've actually given ourselves that responsibility to deliver that why here is really quite critically important here. So I'm going to just have a look in terms of the why it's so important. If we set ourselves a task and a goal to actually achieve something, then it's critical that we actually make ourselves responsible for that. And I'm just going to, I suppose the king, I would call him, of LinkedIn just shown up. John, thank you very much for that welcome message. If you don't know who John Espirian is, then I would suggest that you've been obviously living on Mars. John is a good guy. I'm pleased to be a member of his group here. And what he doesn't know about LinkedIn is probably not worth writing about on a postage stamp as well. So, John, likewise to you. Happy weekend to yourself. Now, if we come back to this idea of about responsibility. So if I'm in a business, so there are lots of practical suggestions, and I'm going to mention that in a few moments here about a reference point here. If you don't make yourself accountable, responsible for driving your business forward, for making money here, that's going to have a massive impact. It's going to have an impact on you. You're going to have a lot of anxiety that's coming about because you're not achieving those financial targets. You're not actually making money enough. That puts extra stress on what goes on between here. And there is an interrelationship with your mental state of mind, your framework, your well-being, and how you handle money and how that impacts on your well-being. There is nothing worse, and I have seen this in thousands of businesses across the private commercial businesses, in terms of in arts and social enterprises, whatever. When money is a problem, when it creates the anxiety here, it's not a good thing. Now, there's obviously the issues about sustainability and survivability, but actually having that impact, is not a really good thing. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Nadine Powery, wonderful person. That's a great comment here. Let me just share that with everyone. Yeah, absolutely. As in all things, Nadine, that's a great comment here. All these things are a balance. Putting too much pressure on yourself, if that's how I'm interpreting your comment here, can actually be a very, shall we say, negative thing there as well. Making yourself too accountable. Yeah, I think that's a fair, valid point here. In terms of how we make it responsibility, and I'm going to be talking about the language in a moment here, is we're going to talk about the tools. We're going to talk about, for me, what is the underpinning requirement for somebody being responsible for their financial outcomes, and that's having a financial story plan. I'm going to comment on that in a few moments here. But the language that we use when we address ourselves, the language that we use when we talk to others who are responsible for delivering our why, is really quite critical. Too many businesses have this language of "you should have done," that sort of negative language that's being adopted when they're reviewing somebody's performance. And that actually can make people very defensive. It can make people feel less willing to share the reasons why they're not getting there. Taking responsibility for your actions, it's about, and accountability is not the same as shaming somebody and making somebody feel bad. If you have that sort of lack of empathy, if you have that sort of lack of understanding about why something is not being achieved, then you can create a bit of a monster for yourself. Now, for me, taking responsibility, we have that idea, as children, as we grow up, we're told to be responsible for what we do. Our parents may sort of guide us there, our friends, our family, our schools, all play their part. But when we're in business, largely we are on our own. So whether you're a business that employs several hundred of people, whether you're a business that employs only a few, whether you're a solopreneur, ultimately the life as the business owner can be quite lonely. And you are the one who's going to take ultimate responsibility for delivering that. And again, that idea of accountability, we don't want to put too much pressure on ourselves. And there are ways that we can do that where we don't actually overload ourselves with a responsibility and a burden, which we're not going to actually be able to deliver. So that idea of accountability, that idea of taking responsibility, that idea of being accountable to our actions and our behaviors is really important. And it's as important in business, which is what we're focusing on, as it is in any area of our lives. If we don't take responsibility for delivering ultimate success, which partly is measured in financial terms, then we're not going to get to our sort of northern star. Why we need to do that? Well, there's obviously, the fact is, if we consider a business, as I said, I don't know of any single business owner, I don't know of any single organization, whatever sector they happen to be in, whether that's across the arts and social, whether across public sector, local authorities, whether that's in charities, private companies, there is everybody wants to have this idea of success. And to be successful, whatever your measure is, whatever that looks like for you, you've got to think, okay, that's the end point I've got to get to. And therefore, I've got to make sure that as I progress on each step of that journey, I'm going to achieve what I'm setting out to do. I'm going to actually get to those milestones, and when I can get to those milestones, that's a great thing there as well. If you take no responsibility, you're just going to drift there, and you're going to be forever chasing your tail. Now, I want to talk in terms of how do we actually go about that, reinforce some of the language sets that we've got to use when we review this and look at ourselves and our team members. And for me, underpinning it is what I call a financial story plan. That financial story plan effectively is made up of two key components. Number one, it's this idea that in our own businesses, not somebody else's business, we have this idea of what our destination may look like. We should be able to visualize that. We should be able to articulate. We should be able to describe that and have a feeling and a connection of where we want our business to end up. It may be where we want it to end up ultimately in a 20-year cycle, which is really an incredible time frame to look at. But it happens for major, large organizations. They might be looking ahead 20 years to where they're going to end up. We may have a business that we're going to look in shorter time frames here. But we're going to have this idea still in 12 months' time, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time. This is where I want my business to be. And if you can't define that, if you can't articulate that, if you can't know what its feeling is, you're going to find it very difficult to know if you're being successful, if you're actually making progress, if you're actually going in the direction that you want to. So it all starts off, what does that end point actually look like? And you need to be able to describe it, you need to be able to look at it, and you need to be able to measure it as well. And measurement is not just in a financial outcome, but measuring it, because if you don't know you've actually got there, how do you know you've actually achieved that? It's then the idea about what is it I need to do as a business in order for me to progress where I am from today to get to that end point in 12 months' time, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time. What does that require in terms of my skill sets, the skill sets of my team? What does that require in terms of relationship building? What does that require in terms of marketing activity? What are the channels? What are the communication routes that I need to go to reach my end audience? Where do my customers hang out? How do I actually communicate with them? So if if LinkedIn is your platform, I'm just going to give them a little plug because it's well served. John Espirian, amongst many other people, but I would recommend John is the person that you go to say, okay, I want to use LinkedIn for good as opposed to evil. How do I actually use that to my best advantage to reach my target audience, to make those communications, to make those connections, and to actually build up my profile, and ultimately to get more engagements, get more work, etc., etc., etc. So we think through that. We think in terms of what do I need to invest in terms of maybe buying more equipment, training courses. All those things are figured out, and you've got to have a well articulated narrative to say, from where I am today, with all these constraints, all these things in front of me, how do I progress on that journey? Now, there is a secondary stage, which I'm going to mention in a moment. And I'm just going to flag this comment up from Nadine because I think that's a great comment to share. Let's have a look. Yeah, perfect. Now that is, for me, that's an excellent way of actually looking at business. So you've got this idea. So we noticed there what Nadine's flagged up, this idea of destination. And remember, folks, if you don't have a destination in your mind, if you don't have a destination either noted, visually represented of where you want to get to, all that's going to happen is you're going to be marking time, you're going to be treading water, which is fine if that's the type of lifestyle that you want to adopt, if that's a style of business that you want to adopt. But you won't actually be able to know in your own mind, am I doing well? How am I performing? Am I making progress? And all those questions, I've seen thousands of business owners go through that little tortuous conversation with themselves as to knowing how they're actually progressing. So a visual board, as Nadine's outlined, is a great way of looking at it. Now, having got a visual board or a Word document, a Google document, however you want to articulate that, endpoint, journey plan, the bit in the middle, you then translate that into a financial outcome. So once we know what that journey route looks like, once we know where we should be at certain points in our journey, where should that journey be within 6 months? Where should we be on our journey in 3 months? Again, I would probably articulate that down and to look at life in terms of month by month footprints. You might wish to go in a closer level of detail and look at it on a week by week, but you want to be careful not to put too much of a burden on yourself there as well. Because remember, you're going to inculcate, you're going to be taking on this journey plan, and that's your route map. Having decided what your journey plan looks like, having decided what those activities are, and please avoid wishy-washy things like saying, oh, I'm going to market my business more, I'm going to make lots of money. If you can't measure it, if you can't recognize it, if you can't visualize it, it becomes very, very difficult to know you've actually arrived at that point. It becomes very difficult also to quantify that, what that looks like in terms of outcomes. Very difficult to measure that in terms of financial metrics and all the rest of it. So describe it and articulate it. And it doesn't matter, by the way, to begin with, folks, if you can't fully do that, this will refine itself over a period of time. Now, once you've got your financial outcomes, your financial story then represents your accountability buddy. That, for you, represents what you have set your path on, what you have taken on as your responsibility as the business owner, what you have said to yourself are your targets, your challenges, your outcomes here, and then it's for you and your team and the people that work with you in your business, the many suppliers, the degrees of expertise you'll bring in to get you to that point there as well. Now, we now have two perspectives. We have got an expectation of a route map that we've outlined. It's measured in financial terms. We have the backing of it, what that is in descriptive terms, and we've broken that down into a monthly journey to saying at the end of each month, this is what we have said, this is what we are expecting to actually have arrived. That's the thing that you're going to be reviewing, and that element is your accountability buddy. Now, be careful of the language that you're adopting when you talk to yourself, as many of business owners do, and be careful of the language you use when you're reviewing your team members as you're reviewing their progress against those targets that have been set in your business. I'm going to talk about, by the way, target setting, how we go about them, the types of targets in future broadcasts. If you check out I Hate Numbers, if you check out the YouTube channel, which is going along the screen there, there have been previous resources published, free resources I would hasten to add, where you can dip into them and actually delve in deeper to understand about these things about target setting. But let's get back to the main germane point there as well. Now, if I'm typically looking at a month's worth of progression and I'm looking at my financial story plan, ultimately it's going to translate itself and says, okay, in this particular month, this is my expectation of what I would have achieved by way of typically the level of sales that I've generated, the level of profitability that I've generated, perhaps money in the bank as well. I would also add that in. And then I'm going to look at where I actually am in reality. I'm comparing reality against expectations. If you are a Doris Stokes, if you're somebody like a Mystic Meg, if you've got perfect insight into the future, and you've predicted 100% accurately, I would say congratulations, drop me a line later on and we can have a fantastic time on the stock market predicting outcomes. It's unlikely to be 100% correct. However, that doesn't matter to a large extent because what you're looking at is to say, I've looked at some point through the windscreen of my business. I'm not looking through the rear view mirror. I'm looking forwards. I've decided, I've made a decision. I thought based on everything else that's going on in the business landscape that I operate in, the people I'm working with, the marketing activities, the capacity, the level of resources, all those things that are going on, this is what I've actually arrived at. Now, there is likely to be a gap. There's likely to be a gap which says you're underperforming, you're not quite where you wanted to be, or you could be overperforming. Now, for me, the power comes in the accountability is the questions you're asking as to why this has occurred. And when you're asking why, if you're asking that of yourself, if you're asking that of your team members, you need to avoid what I call negative language. Finger waving, admonishing yourself or your team members for not quite getting there is not going to be the thing that actually motivates you to do better. It's not the thing that's going to actually try and dig deeper into what's going on. There could be many things going on in terms of from how you're feeling, procrastination, things delaying you, circumstances outside of your control, people letting you down in the process, those events being out of kilter, seasonally speaking. And what you're interested in is discovering the whys. Once you know the whys, what's causing this situation to occur, then you can put it right or relax accordingly. These could be, again, a factor of timing itself. You haven't quite got the capacity to execute fully your marketing plan. The marketing plan you put in practice, you just need a little bit more patience for it to come to fruition. Typically, in any financial story plan, you've got to bear in mind, folks, 3 things are going to be guaranteed. Number one, we tend to underestimate how long things take to get to where we want to. So our level of impatience, our level of thinking, we want it to happen right now, which is understandable. Things take longer than we anticipate to begin with. Things also typically cost more than we may have anticipated as well. And there could be a number of reasons behind that. And thirdly, unfortunately, we can't avoid this. Every single business owner, myself included, will have a situation where they get let down, they hit a bump in the road, a bit of a backwards cycle, things come to a stall, and things don't go quite as well as they expected. People may let you down. There may be, shall we say, you get sucked into a relationship that you think is going to be really positive, doesn't quite work out. It could be things have happened that you didn't anticipate. So things will go wrong. And it's not the fact that things go wrong that's the issue, it's about how you're going to react to those circumstances. So, having reviewed and understood why it's happening, that gives us the opportunity to put it right. Now, there's a couple of things I would probably add to the mix here, folks. When we are going to be accountable, I think it's picking up a point also that Nadine mentioned earlier on. One thing we have to do as business owners is when we set targets, when we set milestones, when we set where we want to get to, you've got to be, when I say realistic, you've got to set targets that are acceptable to you in light of what your aspirations are, in light of what your risk appetite is, in light of what your capacity is, in light of the speed of direction that you want to travel in as well. So make sure those targets are acceptable. I would suggest that you make them stretching, so not quite super duper easy, because that can be demotivating. Don't make them impossible, like doubling turnover in 12 months with no capacity behind you, no marketing budget behind you either. Set them realistic and make them stretching. So slightly outside perhaps of if you just do a tick over situation, make them stretching. And make those targets such that you can measure them and quantify them. Because if you can't measure them, if you can't articulate them, then it's going to become very difficult to know where you are. One thing, and unfortunately, that's the curse of us in the 21st century. Technology gives us the ability to spew targets and outcomes and measures till they come out of our ears. For me, that's too much overwhelm. You need to have a very few selected targets, key headline numbers that you're looking at. Our brains can focus on fewer, have too much, and you're going to get a level of overwhelm. Now, there's a wonderful phrase here by business person Thomas Monson, and I'm going to read it out here. When I came across this quote, I thought it was brilliant. When you measure performance, performance increases. When you measure and report on that performance, the rate of your improvement accelerates. So it's about not only measuring the performance, but it's reporting back to yourself, back to your team members, and having those conversations. And what you'll tend to find is the rate of acceleration, the performance that you want to achieve in your business will accelerate accordingly. One other thing I would probably add to this, as we come to the conclusion of this broadcast, is about the habits. Now, if you're a business owner, most of us business owners know that when finance people like myself say it's really important, it's really critical to your business to have a financial story, to have a financial plan that reflects the direction that you want your business to go in. That also doubles up as an accountability tool here. Most businesses know it, but actually doing it is something slightly differently. So knowing what to do isn't really the issue. It's the commitment to the process that's the really difficult thing. Business owners, individuals, loads of us make commitments to ourselves saying we are going to do this. This is how we want to progress. But actually doing it and actually achieving it and maintaining it becomes the difficult thing there as well. Now, if you find yourself in that position, then those habits you want to adopt, those habits are going to be that are really going to be good for you and your business. Do them slowly. It's far better, for example, if you're an exercise person, to do a 3 to 5 minute walk every single day. So you can do it consistently, you can do it habitually, you can do it as a degree of repetition. It's not too much of an overripe burden, and you can also just get that accepted as a habitual behavior. It's then easier to increase the level of activity. If you've got to increase your water intake, which is always a recommended thing, that you stay hydrated, then drinking half a cup of water every single day is much easier than saying I'm going to drink 2 litres, 3 litres every single day, because you won't do that. Set those changes in behaviour, make them small, so you don't set yourself up for failure. If you're somebody who doesn't actually review their own performance and you haven't quite got a financial story put together, you've got 2 options. Number 1, check out the Numbers Know-How site, drop me a line, and then we can help put your financial story together. Numbers Know-How is being built as a financial storytelling community. More of that in later broadcasts here. But key thing is, if you haven't quite got your financial story written out here, just get into the habit then, perhaps each week, each month, getting your bank statements and just reading them. Don't look at them as a negative thing here, and look at how your bank balance is changing each month. I would also probably suggest that if you have got a business bank account, which you obviously should do, then if you've got things like obligations to pay out for, taxes, your own taxes, company taxes, VAT and whatever, ring fence them, move them out of your main current account, move them separate. So when you do look at your main current account, that reflects your underlying business activity. Look at what's going on. If you've got accounts you're delivering to that you give credit to, so you've got credit customers, again, get into the habit once a week, perhaps once every 2 weeks, review those list of people who owe you money. If you listen to this and thinking, Mahmood, I don't have that level of intelligence in my business, I don't have that level of information at my hand, then that's something you're missing out dramatically. And you need to get yourself plugged in to a good system, an accounting digital system that enables you to do that. So if you haven't got those habits at the moment, start them now. Do them little, build them up, and you will find, I promise you folks, that having that degree of financial accountability in your business is a dramatic way to improve not only how you feel, but to help you actually get to your end goal, your Northern Star, as I would call that. So folks, thank you very much for your time today. I hope some of this has made sense, if not all of it. Thank you very much for anyone who's made comments. Nadine and John, thank you very much for your comments from earlier. If you agree with me, fantastic. I will take a bow. If you disagree, which is perfectly fine, let me know in the comments box, and hashtag replay to it so I can pick up all those comments itself. I would suggest, obviously, check out the YouTube channel, I Hate Numbers. I publish a weekly video on that, more to come. I'm also the proud author of the book I Hate Numbers. Somebody has said very kindly, without me bribing them, how it's one of the best finance for non-financial books out there at the moment. They've learned a lot from that. It's not aimed just at startup businesses. It's aimed for any business where perhaps numbers may not be their forte. And even if numbers are your forte, by the way, it's still a good book here, available direct from me, or go to Mr. Amazon and you can buy a copy there as well. So folks, listen, I hope you got some value from this. If you have, I'd love to hear from you, obviously in the comments box. Check out those resources here, and good luck with making yourself more financially accountable in your own businesses. This is Mahmood saying, till next week, have a fantastic week. And let's play out with some music, would be only appropriate.